Hey, I'm SJ and this is the Menopause and Motherhood Podcast. Hey friend, I have got a short but punchy episode for you today that I know you're going to love. Today's episode is about stress and how stress can be linked to weight gain. Now, I know if you're a mum, you're going to be pretty stressed because you're likely to be juggling your family, you're likely to be potentially juggling work, and you're kind of doing two full-time jobs all at once. And I think as women, it's really easy for us to forget how our day-to-day life is actually quite stressful. Not necessarily from a physical perspective always, but if you think about all of the mental load that you are juggling, all of the things that are going on in your family, and then you add into the mix this up and down roller coaster ride of hormones as we're going into perimenopause, it's no wonder that we can start to see the effects. Today, we're going to dig into the science behind it, and then I'm going to leave you with some ideas of how you can take some action for yourself to try and reduce your stress levels and hopefully to reduce your weight, because I know for many of you that's quite an important thing and one of the reasons why you listen to this podcast. Now, before we get started on that, I want to invite you to become a friend of the show. You can get access to some exclusive bonus content, some recipes. We're going to have some live Q&A sessions. The link to become a friend of the show is in the show notes. I'd love to see you there. I'd love to welcome you as part of that community. And your support really does go a long way to keeping this podcast going. Let's dig into perimenopause, cortisol, and weight gain, and we're going to try and understand the connection between the two. So we know as we're perhaps in our late 30s, 40s and 50s, many of us, and myself included, start experiencing this unexplained weight gain. Now, I keep saying this, but I literally felt that when I hit 40, my body just flicked a switch, and all of a sudden I gained this weight around the midsection. And I was still eating well, I was still exercising, but I just found like over time, my weight on the scale just kept creeping up. I was finding it that I wasn't fitting into my clothes anymore. My jeans were too tight. I had to upsize in my clothes. And there is, the reason behind all of this is our hormones. And this perimenopause period, this transition period, it brings a lot of up and down changes to our hormones that we've spoken a lot about in the previous episodes. And it impacts your metabolism. It impacts the energy that we have, and it impacts our body composition. And one of the real primary players in this process is cortisol, which is the hormone that we have when we are stressed. So let's talk a little bit more about cortisol and its role that it has during perimenopause. So cortisol is produced by your adrenal glands, and it plays a really, really important, crucial role when it comes to managing stress. It helps to regulate your metabolism and also control inflammation. And under normal circumstances, cortisol levels fluctuate throughout the day, they go up and down, and your cortisol levels tend to peak in the morning and then gradually decline as you go towards nighttime when you start thinking about going to bed. Now, unfortunately, in perimenopause, because our estrogen and progesterone levels are on this up and down roller coaster, this can lead to our body feeling really stressed, and it can lead to chronic cortisol elevation, especially in a response to stress. So if you think about this, our body has this normal sort of level. And even before we sort of take outside environmental factors into account here, our body is normally going through an up and down, sort of fluctuating normal levels of stress. If you're a bit stressed at work, if you've got things going on at home, waking up in the morning, all of that it's normal. And when you then add into that your busy lifestyle as a mum, as a woman, your mental load, the worrying that you probably do about your family and everything that's going on, and then perhaps a job or your business that you're running. And then you add into the mix, just to top it off, fluctuating estrogen and progesterone levels. And your body's like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? This is really stressful. And this is your body then feeling that it's in this constant stress state. And that is really, really linked to weight gain. So let's talk a little bit more about how cortisol actually contributes to weight gain. Now, when your cortisol levels remain high for a long period of time, your body sort of shifts into this survival mode. And it can lead to a number of different changes in your metabolism that contribute to weight gain. And if you think about survival mode, as for us as humans, sort of from before we had the ability to actually go to the supermarket and buy food and that sort of thing, like cortisol was necessary. We need cortisol. We need to be put under stress sometimes to, run away from the bear and that sort of thing. And the problem we have is our lifestyle, this modern lifestyle that we have where we don't really disconnect, we don't switch off, the food that we're eating, all of these factors really can lead us into this state of chronic stress. And then for us as women, as we're going through perimenopause, we're adding into this with this up and down roller coaster from our hormones. So ultimately what we're talking about is our body being in this chronic stress state and being in this constant on the edge survival mode. And I don't know about you, but I certainly feel like that sometimes. I feel like I'm really on the edge, everything really kind of irritates me. I'm really I feel tired all the time. And that is being in this chronic cortisol state and this state of stress. So cortisol levels, when they're high for long periods of time, one of the impacts that this can have is it leads to increased fat storage. So when our cortisol levels are high, it signals to our body to store more fat. And it's signaling to our body to store fat in the abdomen area. And we know that having this visceral fat, so visceral fat is fat that sits around your key organs, heart, lungs, that sort of thing, can lead to an increased risk in heart disease, diabetes, and other metabolic syndromes. So high levels of cortisol, high levels of stress mean your body is more likely to store fat. And if you think back to, years ago, caveman, when your body was under stress, then it needed to take on that fat, to store that fat, because it didn't know when it was going to get its next meal. And it's kind of like our body's sort of protective system working against us. So that's number one. Number two, let's talk about blood sugar imbalances. So when you're stressed, and we spoke last episode, we did a whole episode around insulin resistance. We spoke about that last week. So when you're stressed, this can lead to an increase in insulin resistance. So it makes it harder for your cells in your body to absorb glucose, and this can result in higher blood sugar levels and an increase in fat accumulation. Now, if you didn't listen to last week's episode around insulin resistance, go back and check it out because it's a really interesting one. There's so much information around insulin resistance, and I do think it's something that we need to touch on a bit more. It's something we need to have a bigger conversation around and think about the things that we can do in our day-to-day life to try and help our bodies with this. Okay, number three, muscle loss. So when your cortisol levels are high, your body will often go to your muscle tissue first for energy. So our body wants to make our life easy for itself, and your body will think, okay, right, I need some energy. Where's that going to come from? And it will break down your muscle tissue because that's easier to break down. So when you have less muscle, that's going to slow down your metabolism, and it's going to make it harder for us to burn calories more effectively. Number four, stress. Stress eating. Yes, I'm sure you've done it. I've certainly done it as well. So when you're stressed, you're really likely to experience an increase in cravings and appetite. Now, I know that for some people, that can go the other way, and then that can lead to quite severe weight loss as well. But in this case, we're talking about it having an impact in terms of increasing your cravings and your appetite. So cortisol triggers the release of a hormone called ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone. And this can lead to cravings for sugary, high carb and fatty foods, things that we know aren't good for us, that aren't going to serve us, that aren't going to help us to lose weight. And number 5, stress, and you're likely to have experienced this as well, is going to interrupt your sleep. We know as well for some of the symptoms of perimenopause, like hot flushes, can disturb your sleep as well. So when you're stressed and your hormones are up and down, it's really likely to disrupt your sleep. So when you are in perimenopause, it's really possible that you might be struggling with something like insomnia or getting like a poor quality of sleep due to these hormone fluctuations. And again, it's like this really hard cycle to break, because the lack of sleep increases cortisol, which then continues to create this cycle of weight gain and stress. And if you think about the other ones as well, if you're not sleeping very well, you're more likely to have cravings and increase appetite for sugary foods. It really is this really hard, challenging cycle. And I don't say that to make you feel despondent. I say it to help you understand how hard this is, and that it's not you, and that you shouldn't be giving yourself a hard time about this, and to be patient and understanding with yourself and not stress about it, because that's going to make things worse. So let's talk about some of the sort of like high level strategies that we're going to touch on that you can think about to manage cortisol and prevent weight gain. So there are a lot of things that we can do. I'm going to give you 6 ideas, but what I would suggest you do is pick one. And I would always suggest, because I talk about the pyramid of values in terms of the things that you can do to help you to feel better, to lose weight, to have more energy. And I always say at the bottom of the pyramid is this idea of rest. Like, rest is crucial. Getting good quality sleep, resting when your body needs it, because without that, the other things are not going to happen. If you're not sleeping, you're not going to want to cook healthy meals. If you're not resting, you're not going to want to get up and do some exercise. So number 1 on my list really is about prioritizing stress. So thinking about managing your stress. And I know that's really easy for me to say, because you've probably got a lot of stress and a lot of things on your plate. But think about finding some activities that you might be able to do, like yoga, maybe some meditation, some deep breathing, going for a walk in nature, and not looking at your phone. I'm absolutely like such an advocate for just go for a 10-minute walk with your phone in your pocket and don't get it out. And don't listen to music. Don't try and distract yourself while you're walking. Just walk like for 10 minutes without distraction and just having 10 minutes of peace. Or if you have a garden or some sort of outside space, just go and sit there for 10 minutes and just listen to the sounds around you. And there's this really good technique that we used to use with children in schools. And it was sort of like looking for things that they can hear, see, feel, like taste and touch, and just really sort of like tune into your senses. I'll dig that out. And for those of you that are like friends of the podcast, I'll put some resources into the back, into that area for you so that you can go and access those, because it's a technique I used to use with the children in my class, but it really switches on their senses. And I've used it with my daughter Chloe, and actually when she was sort of feeling quite anxious about going to school, it was something that I found really helped her to manage her stress as she was thinking about school. So engaging in some kind of stress reducing activities will go a long way, and 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever you can do. I know it's hard. So this is number 2 is a continuation of this idea of resting. Really support your sleep health. And I know it's really hard if you've got kids and they wake you up and all of the things that come with everyday life. But even when Chloe was a really, really young baby, one of the things I absolutely prioritized was sleep. So I used to go to bed at like 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I put like blackout curtains, I had an eye mask, I had earplugs, and I put myself to bed at like 6 o'clock in the evening. And I just, and Tim would, Chloe's dad, he would take Chloe until midnight. So it meant that, bar waking up and, sort of settle down time, it meant that I could still get sort of 4 or 5 hours like uninterrupted. And then she'd wake up at midnight, like for her next feed or something. And then I would then deal with that, put her back down and get a couple more hours. So what is there that you can do that may not be convenient right now? Because that absolutely wasn't convenient. I'll be honest with you, going to bed at like 7 o'clock in the evening when it was still like bright light outside, that wasn't convenient. But it helped. So what can you do to prioritize your sleep? Like, do you need to go to bed when your kids go to bed? Do you need to go to bed earlier? What's more important? And I think this is quite an important conversation to have here is watching the TV or scrolling on your phone more important than actually getting some sleep? So really, really do what you can to get some good quality sleep by establishing a really nice like bedtime routine for yourself, getting rid of the phones and keeping your sleep environment nice and cool and nice and dark. And again, like I really have invested in like eye masks, and like I've got these like earplugs from Amazon, they're called Loop, which are pretty good, and you can sleep with those, and I find those super helpful as well. Okay, so those were the first two. Let's talk about the next one on my pyramid, which is to do with like the food and the fuel. So let's talk about balancing our diet. The way I like to think about it like this is I know my body is already under stress. It's under stress from my life, the goings on in my life. It's under stress because of my hormones are playing like whack-a-mole over here. I don't want to be giving my body any more stress. So how can I make life easier for my body? And the way that we can do that when it comes to our diet is making sure that we're prioritizing the right food and we're not making our body work harder for us. So that means like lean protein, healthy fats, fiber, complex carbohydrates, and reducing these processed foods that have all these extra additional ingredients that our liver and our body is going to have to work harder to ultimately process and get rid of. So things like alcohol, for example, like that's going to make it harder for our body to do its job. So I always think about it when it comes to my food, I want to try and help my body and make its life easier because it's already under stress. And a really good way to do that is really focusing in on your diet, thinking about what you're eating, and just making life easier for your body. Another thing around nutrition is also to consider some adaptogens. So certain herbs, things like ashwagandha, holy basil, there's a lot of sort of supplements and things out there that you might want to do your own research on, which can support your adrenal health and regulate cortisol levels. Now, I would really advise perhaps even having a chat with a medical professional about this. And I would also advise maybe just try one thing at a time. So maybe try something that's got some ashwagandha in it, or something that's got magnesium in it. One of the things I'm quite liking at the moment that you can get are these, they're like cans of drink, and they're made by a company called Trip, which is like TRIP. And there's a really nice one. It's blood orange and rosemary, but it's a nice tasty drink that I have in the evening after we've put Chloe to bed and we sit down, and Tim tends to have like a cup of tea and some biscuits. So I've invested in this drink for myself. It's really tasty. I get a nice glass out. I put some ice in. I pour the drink over, and it's like, a bit of an end of day treat. The kind of thing that you might do, with a glass of wine or something. But it's a drink that tastes nice, but it's got also additional levels like added magnesium in it. Now, I don't know whether that's actually, there is a lot of evidence around magnesium. That's a conversation for another day. But it's just something that I'm trying, the whole process of just sitting down and having a nice drink at the end of the day is probably helping to relieve some stress as well. But it's not going to make my body have to work harder, because there's no ingredients in it that are going to cause it problems. And it does actually have some ashwagandha in it as well. The company's called Trip. I'm sure you have them like in the States and stuff. But in the UK, it's the yellow can. It's blood orange and rosemary. Sounds really weird, but it's super tasty. Okay, so moving on from that as well, in terms of nutrition, hydration, staying hydrated, really, really important. Our body is made up so much of water. Finding ways to get as much water in as possible, buying yourself a big cup, whatever it looks like, getting that water in, and then reducing alcohol. Now, if you can, I would really highly recommend that you try going a month without alcohol and just see how you feel. Like, don't think about your diet. Don't think about anything else. Don't think about an exercise regime or anything like that. Just go a month without drinking and see how you feel. Now, I choose not to drink by choice because I know that it puts extra stress on my body. It's really difficult. I think my body really struggles to break down alcohol. So I choose not to drink alcohol and replace it, like I've done, with a nice drink that you're treating yourself to, that, has some bonus ingredients in it that's going to help your body. And, it's a nice thing to do for yourself at the end of the day. And then the last one that I want to talk about, which is always at the top of my pyramid, and I think this is always the one that we always try and do first, but actually we need to get the other stuff sorted first before we then think about the exercise. The exercise is the cherry on top. And when it comes to cortisol levels in our bodies, as we're in our late 30s, 40s, 50s onwards, we have to think about how we're exercising and perhaps changing some of our habits. And I really think it's important to remember that there is a real difference between men and women's bodies and how our bodies react to exercise. I don't know if you've ever worked out with your husband. I have. And his body reacts totally different to my body. We can do the same workout together. He can lift more, he can do more, he's physically stronger, he's a man. And his body reacts very, very different to that exercise than my body does. And our bodies, as we're going through perimenopause, are going to react very differently to exercise than when we were in our 20s and our early 30s. So thinking about exercise, exercising smart. And if this is something that you think you could use some help with, book a one-to-one session with me, because we can really dig into this. Because so often we're led to believe that like high intensity workouts can be beneficial. Now, I'm not saying they're not, but it's important to remember that for us, as our body is stressed because of our hormones, because we're in perimenopause, excessive cardio really can spike your cortisol levels. Now, I love cardio. Like, I love the way it makes me feel after I've done it. Like that, that sweaty endorphin rush. Like, I really, really love that feeling. But that does spike your cortisol levels. And we've spoken about how cortisol can, increase cravings. It can disrupt your sleep. So thinking about, when you're exercising, thinking about what you're eating before and after you exercise, like all of that really, really can have an impact on your weight gain. And we can often think that actually doing high intensity workouts are going to help us lose weight, but actually it can have the complete opposite effect. So try and think about incorporating strength training, low impact activities like cycling, walking, Pilates, yoga, and maybe reducing the number of high intensity workouts that you have done. Now, I know that's hard. If you're like me, that is hard. Like, I exercise because I love the buzz that I get from exercise, from pushing my body and pushing my body hard. So really, it's important to check back on that and to try and ensure that you're giving your body, again, we're coming back to this idea of rest being the foundation of everything that we do. So if you want some help with some exercise, if I can help you with any of this, please book a one-to-one session with me. I also have some courses that are linked below if you'd rather work through things more independently. And I do have a course called the Weight Loss Framework, which takes you through like de-stressing your life. It helps you to think about like your nutrition, and then it also offers some guidance around exercise and how to work that around the women's body. And on that note, if you are working with a coach and a trainer, I would really recommend that you work with a female trainer as you're going through perimenopause, because there are so many great male trainers, and I really don't want to take away from their knowledge and their experience, but they really don't understand because they're not women. They don't know what it's like to have a menstrual cycle and how that impacts your day-to-day moods. They don't understand in the same way as women do, you know, and particularly like a trainer that's my age, that's your age, you know, a 40-year-old, 50-year-old personal trainer is going to probably have knowledge and experience that perhaps a 20-year-old isn't. So I would really, really encourage you to find a trainer that you look at who is like you, but the healthier, fitter version of you. So I mean, let's get reality, and I'm not taking away from like the younger trainers, but I always think there's no point in looking at a 27-year-old woman and thinking, yeah, I want to be like her. Like, I want my body to look like her. It's because we're not 27. We're perimenopausal women. We're perimenopausal mothers who have been through childbirth as well. So for me, I would actually be looking for a trainer who was a similar age to me, who looks healthy, who, you know, is someone I could look at as a role model. You know, I always look at some of these yoga instructors, and they're often like in the gym, some of these yoga instructors, like 70, 80 years old. And I think I want to be like that lady when I'm older. I want to be as stretchy, as flexible. So if you are working with a trainer and you're maybe working one-to-one in person, like pick somebody who you aspire to be like them, but without rewinding the clock, because that's not reality. And somebody who knows what it is like to be you, somebody who knows what it's like to have our hormones. That's just my personal opinion, and I think that can be really, really beneficial, because I've seen so many times, and I've worked with so many ladies who have come to me having had a really nice male young personal trainer who's, you know, doing everything that they think is right, but they don't get it because they're not a woman and they're not in their 40s and 50s. So that would just be one of my real key pieces of advice if you're thinking about exercise. But of course, you can always work with me. The link to that is in the show notes. So I really hope this episode was helpful, giving you some ideas about stress, how it can cause weight gain, and then some of the strategies that you might want to try to see if you can reduce your stress to ultimately reduce your weight. I know that weight gain can feel frustrating and disheartening, but once you've got a better understanding, because knowledge is power, and you understand what cortisol is doing and some of the strategies that you might want to implement, you can really take more of a holistic approach to helping your overall well-being during perimenopause. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to remind you there's a couple of ways that you can work with me if you would like some additional help and support. You could start by becoming a friend of the show to access some bonus content, some recipes, and some strategies. You could work with me on a one-to-one basis with some coaching, or you could access my weight loss framework course, and all of those links are in the show notes. Have an amazing day. Have an amazing week. I'm praying for you, and I look forward to catching you in the next episode.